Hey guys, tonight we head somewhere unexpected. The city of Rome, but not the glowing columns and gladiator-filled arenas. No, tonight, you're going deep beneath the marble, into the not-so-glamorous world of Roman bathrooms. It's night, the streets are quieter now, torches flicker on uneven stone walls, and you wander through the alleys not in search of gold, but a place to go. And trust me, you'll want to go before we begin. You hear the trickle of running water, the shuffle of sandals. There's a smell, earthy, sharp, and somehow metallic. You hold your breath. A marble bench stretches along the wall ahead. Holes are carved in it like an ancient cheese grater, side by side, just open. No doors, no curtains, no stalls. This is the bathroom. And unfortunately for you, you're not alone. You're never alone. Ancient Roman toilets were very public. Like, shared eye contact public. It's not just that people could see you, they were actively hanging out while they did their business. Conversations flowed more freely than the waste beneath you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, comment below where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. I love seeing how far this sleepy little time machine travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Blank, underscore, blank. You walk into a Roman latrina, a public toilet, tucked under an archway or at the back of a bustling bathhouse. It's cooler inside, damp and echoey. There's a faint trickle of running water, always present, like a mountain stream, except it smells more like ancient soup. The seats are stone, carved in a perfect row. There's no separation between them. You're sitting inches away from your neighbor, and he's already mid-conversation about politics, or grain prices, or which general has the worst haircut. You try not to look. He makes eye contact. You look away. He doesn't. And this wasn't a weird experience, this was normal. The Romans believed in the community. And yes, that extended to using the toilet. In fact, some scholars argue that public restrooms were seen as extensions of Roman civic life, just with a little more splashing. You glance down. The seat is cold. There's a large round hole in front of you and a smaller one, oddly, at the front edge of the seat. That one's not for what you think. We'll get to that. But for now, you lower yourself onto cold stone and try to relax. It's not easy. Here's the thing. Romans weren't shy about bodily functions. To them, cleanliness was a public concern, not a private act. Bathing, sweating, and yes, relieving oneself, it all happened out in the open. And that openness wasn't just tolerated, it was expected. A good Roman knew how to poop with poise. Still, even you, time traveler that you are, can't help but feel a little self-conscious. There's no door, no divider, just a long line of exposed backsides and clattering sandals. And yet, there's something soothing about the rhythm. The quiet chatter, the water flowing beneath the seats, the steady scraping of someone cleaning their tersorium. More on that horror later. There's a strange peace here, like an ancient Starbucks without the lattes. A rat scurries along the floor. You don't scream. That would be rude. Scholars still argue whether these toilets had any kind of scheduled cleaning or maintenance staff. Some believe that bathhouse attendants were responsible for sweeping out the waste troughs and making sure the water stayed flowing. Others argue it was all up to nature, a slow, gravity-fed river of filth carrying away the sins of the city. In any case, you're grateful for the sound of water, even if it smells lived in. You look up. There's no roof, not always. Some latrinae were open to the sky, especially in the countryside. Others were tucked inside bathhouses or even under temples. Imagine praying to Jupiter while someone grunts a few feet below. Divine multitasking. You shift uncomfortably on the stone. It's oddly smooth. Centuries of Roman butts have polished it into a slippery marble slide. You resist the urge to slide. Don't be that tourist. And now you notice something interesting. People are passing around a long-handled sponge. It's communal. You pretend you didn't see it. You pretend it's not slowly making its way toward you. That's a nightmare for Section 3. But for now, take a breath. You're in Rome. You're alive. And you're sitting where senators, soldiers, slaves, and poets once sat, cheek to cheek. And yes, that is both poetic and literal. Blank, underscore, blank. You're still sitting there, or maybe squatting slightly because let's be honest, your modern-day glutes aren't exactly calibrated for ancient marble. Either way, your business isn't the only thing happening here. You start to notice the design. And no, not the, how did I end up in a room full of strangers doing this, vibe, the actual structure of the place. Roman toilets weren't thrown together haphazardly. There was geometry involved, flow, balance, and a surprising amount of thought. This is the latrina, but it's not just any toilet. It's engineered. The bench you're sitting on. It's part of a continuous stone or marble slab, often curved around the edges of a rectangular or semicircular room. Each person has their own oval-shaped seat hole, cut with consistent spacing, about an arm's width apart. Because nothing says boundaries, like a few inches of air between you and your neighbor's situation. Beneath the seat, a narrow trench runs the length of the room. It carries a constant flow of water. Waste disappears down it like a lazy stream. That's the pipe. But then there's the other trough, the one that runs in front of your feet, just under the edge of the seat. It's also got flowing water. That's the cleaning channel, at least by Roman standards. That's where the infamous sponge on a stick gets dipped. Yep, same water, same sponge, same stick, but we're not quite there yet. For now, just focus on the flow. The Romans, ever obsessed with sanitation, relied on aqueducts, those iconic, arching structures that brought fresh water into cities from distant springs. That water didn't just go to bathhouses and fountains. It also went into the sewers. Constant water flow helped carry waste away and clean the system as it was used. Modern sewage treatment, PFF'd. The Romans had gravity-powered flushing 2,000 years ago. You glance down again at the system beneath you. No flush button, obviously, just slow, quiet movement. And although it's not exactly pristine down there, it's not the disaster you were expecting. In fact, it almost feels efficient. But efficient doesn't always mean comfortable. You shift again, noticing how the cold from the seat is starting to creep up your spine. The marble isn't shaped like a modern toilet, there's no comforting curve. It's just a flat slab with a hole in it. You have to angle yourself just right. And yes, you now understand why Roman togas were so loose-fitting. There's no toilet paper. You knew that. But there's also no ventilation. And while the flowing water helps, it doesn't help enough. The air in here is dense, not just with smells, but with stories. You can almost hear whispered regrets echoing off the walls. A soldier walks in, laughs, slaps another guy on the back, and sits down 2 seats away. He's humming. Who hums on the toilet? Romans, apparently. The architecture of the latrina also encourages conversation. No stalls, no doors, no walls, just eye-level companionship and shared vulnerability. In a weird way, it's democratic. Rich, poor, soldier, scholar, everyone poops here. Some scholars still debate whether this openness was by design or just cultural accident. Was it a way to promote Roman unity? A hygiene strategy? Or just a lack of concern for privacy? We don't really know. But we do know this. They didn't see it as weird. You do. But they didn't. There's even evidence that some latrines were beautifully decorated, frescoes, mosaics, painted walls. Can you imagine that? Sitting under an image of Neptune riding dolphins while you release the Kraken. And the acoustics? Excellent. Every cough echoes like a trumpet. Every non-cough echoes louder. You sit very still. Outside, a cart rolls by. A dog barks. Someone shouts in Latin. But inside, it's just murmurs and water. The floor is slightly sloped, channeling overflow away from the main room. Smart. No one wants ancient poop puddles creeping toward their sandals. The walls are stone, thick, and often slightly damp. Not moldy exactly, just Rome being Rome. The lighting, dim. Unless you're lucky enough to be in a latrine with an open oculus, a circular hole in the ceiling that lets in natural light. Otherwise, it's oil lamps. Flickering. Shadows dance across the faces of your fellow sitters. A kid walks in, maybe 10 years old, completely unfazed. He picks a seat, swings his legs, and starts telling a joke. No one flinches. Again, this is normal. This is culture. Another small detail catches your eye: little grooves carved into the stone in front of each seat. Some historians think those were for placing a sponge stick. Others think they were just wear and tear. Either way, it's oddly personal, like a toothbrush holder, but infinitely worse. And as you sit there, you start to realize, the structure isn't just functional. It's intentional. This is what infrastructure looked like when cities were packed, privacy was a luxury, and plumbing was sacred. Your neighbor sneezes. You instinctively say, "Bless you." He thanks you, mid-squat. There's a strange piece here, a rhythm you didn't expect. Maybe it's the water. Maybe it's the flickering light. Or maybe it's the simple humanity of it all, the ancient, undignified unity of needing to go. Welcome to Rome. Blank, underscore, blank. Okay, so you've survived the awkward sitting arrangement. You've admired the stonework. You've even accepted, on some cosmic level, that someone next to you is having a full conversation about olive oil exports while, you know. But then you see it. Someone reaches under the seat. Not their own. Under the bench, just in front, where a little channel of water trickles by lazily like a tired stream that gave up on being a river. And they pull it out. A stick, with a sponge tied to the end. You freeze. This is the tersorium, Rome's version of toilet paper. Not a joke, not a metaphor, a literal communal sponge on a stick. It's stained, worn, questionable, possibly cursed. And it's being dipped, swirled, and tapped dry like a chef preparing for disaster. You stare at it, then immediately regret staring. The user is calm, almost casual, like he's done this 100 times. Because he has. Everyone has. This is the way. You, however, feel your modern soul leave your body temporarily. Let's break this down. In ancient Rome, toilet paper didn't exist. Papyrus was too expensive. Rags, unsanitary. Water alone, not enough. So, they tied natural sea sponges to the ends of wooden sticks, soaked them in water, and used them to clean themselves after, finishing business. Then, they'd rinse the sponge off in the clean channel of running water in front of the seat, give it a little shake, and, wait for it, put it back under the bench. For the next person. Yes. Shared. You are not okay. Scholars still argue whether each user brought their own tersorium, or whether they were truly communal. In wealthier homes, personal ones were probably a thing. In public latrines, though, it's not looking good for your dignity. There's even a Latin phrase, homo sum, humani nihil me alienum puto. Translation: I am human, nothing human is alien to me. You whisper this to yourself like a prayer. It does not help. And here's the kicker. the sponge wasn't just rinsed in plain water. In many cases, the channel water was infused with salt or vinegar. Why? To act as a crude disinfectant. So technically, you're wiping with a pickled sponge. Try not to think about it too hard. And because Rome was efficient, if disturbingly so, there were designated holders for these sticks under the bench. Little carved slots, grooves in the stone, or even jars filled with cleaning fluid. You hear the splash of another tersorium being dunked. You don't look this time. Eye contact is risky in situations like this. There's actually a theory that the sponge was such a common part of life that people didn't even think twice about it. Like, oh, pass the sponge, Lucius, and that was that. No shame, no hesitation. You, however, are filled with both. And yet, oddly, you're impressed. Think about it. A low-cost, reusable hygiene solution that required no paper, no plumbing beyond gravity, and minimal maintenance. Kind of genius. Horrifying genius, but still. It's the definition of sustainable. Biodegradable. Multi-use. You shudder. There's even archaeological evidence of sponge sticks in latrine remains, bits of wood with organic residue, found in sewer systems and drainage layers. And ancient writers mentioned them too. Seneca, for example, once told a grim story about a man who committed suicide using one. Let's not get into that. You're already emotionally unstable from the shared sponge reality. And here's another delightful fact. Romans often didn't wash their hands with soap after using the latrine. Because soap, while known, wasn't widely used. Instead, they might rinse with water. Maybe vinegar. Maybe nothing. So yes, people would use the communal sponge, rinse, and then head out to the market, or dinner, or a debate about the Republic without ever properly sanitizing. That handshake with the philosopher from earlier. You regret it deeply now. You begin to understand why Roman perfumes were so strong. You also begin to understand how diseases spread. Dysentery, parasitic infections, skin conditions, all rampant, especially in crowded urban centers. Yet somehow, people lived long enough to conquer the world. You see someone else pick up a tersorium, delicately, like a reluctant sword, and dip it in the water. It makes a little swishing sound that haunts your soul. The user gives a satisfied grunt. You try not to scream. And now it's there, in front of you, waiting. Do you reach? Or do you just let ancient history stay where it is? Your hand hovers. You're not brave enough. You're also not Roman enough. So you do what any self-respecting time traveler would do. You pretend. You pretend to use it. You wave it vaguely. You dip it once for appearances. And then you return it with the same care one might use for unexploded ordnance. You stand, trying to maintain composure. You nod at your neighbor. He nods back. You survived the sponge. Barely. And as you walk away from the bench, you start to appreciate something you never thought you would: toilet paper. Soft. Private. Yours. Luxury. And somewhere, deep down, a little part of you is grateful for this experience. Not because it was fun, but because now, no modern bathroom will ever feel disappointing again. You lived through the tersorium. And you came out cleaner on the other side. Sort of. Blank, underscore, blank. You're walking away from the sponge, slowly, deliberately, like someone leaving the scene of an emotional crime. You don't look back. You don't speak. You simply breathe. Deep, slow breaths, because you're free now. Or so you think. But even as you distance yourself from the bench and its haunted stick, you realize something: the sound of water is still with you. It follows you. Not a drip, not a puddle, a flow, a constant, quiet stream running through the floor beneath your sandals. You glance down. There, just off to the side of the walkway, is a shallow stone channel, an open-air mini river, weaving through the bathhouse floor, skirting the edge of the toilet room, and disappearing into a dark little hole in the wall. You follow it, because apparently, your curiosity has zero boundaries now. This is the Roman sewer system in action. Not underground pipes, not yet. No pressurized systems or sealed tunnels. Just open gravity-fed water flow that moved day and night, flushing out the worst of Rome without anyone needing to pull a lever. You've heard of aqueducts, of course, those majestic arches stretching across landscapes. But this is where all that water ends up. You step carefully as the flow increases. You're now walking alongside a major drainage path, part of a complex and highly intentional system called the Cloaca Maxima, Latin for the greatest sewer. And honestly, it kind of is. Built centuries before the empire even rose to power, the Cloaca Maxima was one of Rome's oldest public works. It drained rainwater, street filth, kitchen runoff, and, yes, toilet waste, straight into the Tiber River. Out of sight, out of mind. You duck into another latrine, smaller this time, maybe attached to a tavern or a roadside inn. Same bench, same holes, same cursed sponge lurking somewhere nearby. But here, the water channels are louder, more aggressive. The outflow gurgles. It sounds hungry. Romans believed in constant flow. Stagnant water. Dangerous. Stillness. Suspicious. So, every public toilet was designed with fresh water pouring through it 24/7. Even at night. Even when no one was using it. The logic was simple. Keep things moving. And where did all that water come from? From the mountains. From springs. From dozens of miles away, traveling in precisely calculated inclines through stone channels, tunnels, bridges, and pipes. The aqueducts didn't just bring drinking water, they powered Rome's entire hygiene system. You pause, admiring a small water spout where clean-ish water enters the latrine channel. It drips, rhythmically, almost hypnotically. It's the kind of sound you could fall asleep to, if you weren't aware it was essentially rinsing poop away from civilization. Soothing. Scholars still argue whether the system truly improved public health. On one hand, Rome had running water in nearly every neighborhood, a miracle compared to most ancient cities. On the other hand, the sewers weren't sealed, the rivers were polluted, and cross-contamination constant. But even with those flaws, you can't help but admire it. A toilet that flushes itself. A sponge washing station with live water flow. In a world without electricity or modern plumbing, it's kind of genius. You peek into the drainage channel again. It's not clean, not by modern standards, but it's functioning. You can actually see waste moving, floating, dissolving, carried away from sight, from smell, from mind. And the noise it makes. It's not gross. It's calming, like a brook. If you didn't know what it was, you might think it was a garden feature. In fact, in some wealthy Roman homes, the latrines were right next to the garden. Or even in the garden. Tucked beside fountains and fruit trees. Because if the water's already flowing, why not enjoy the view? You walk past a wall where a crude mosaic reads, Cur cities, ubi minor positus. Translation. Why are you here, when you could be peeing? Charming. But it hints at something important. Latrines weren't hidden. They weren't shoved into basements or back alleys. They were part of daily life, sometimes integrated into markets, forums, or public squares. You could be arguing about tax grain quotas one moment, and squatting 2 feet away the next. And always, the water flowed. You notice now how even the floor tiles are subtly sloped. Everything, the benches, the walkways, the channels, is angled to keep things moving. There's a natural rhythm to the place. A low, quiet whoosh that whispers beneath every conversation. And here's the wildest thing, it worked for centuries. The system wasn't perfect, but it kept a city of 1 million people relatively livable, with no electric pumps, no waste treatment plants, just stone, math, and a borderline obsessive relationship with water flow. You lean over and listen. The stream gurgles like a sleepy old man telling a story. A rat darts past. You don't flinch. You're getting used to this. And maybe, just maybe, you're starting to appreciate how weirdly elegant all this is. No buttons. No porcelain. No scented candles. Just gravity, stone, and water that never sleeps. And in a way, neither do you. Blank, blank. You're standing there, listening to the water whisper beneath the stone, feeling strangely peaceful after all the horrors. But suddenly, there's a voice. Close, cheerful. You turn, and realize someone's asking you a question. While seated, mid-business, you nod, hesitate, and then, like you've been Roman all your life, you answer. Congratulations. You're now officially part of the bathroom conversation. Because here's the truth. In ancient Rome, latrines were social spaces. You weren't just there to do your thing and vanish, you were part of the scene. A weird, slightly damp scene, sure. But a social one. You've stepped into a world where toilet talk was just talk. No taboo, no shame. Just a marble bench, a sponge, and some casual political debate. The man next to you shifts, wipes his brow, and says something about the grain prices in Egypt. Someone else down the bench replies with a groan, and suddenly, you're in a roundtable discussion. Except everyone's pants are somewhere around their ankles. It's bizarre. It's also kind of normal. You realize now. Romans didn't hide from their bodily functions. They didn't act like they were shameful or secret. They acknowledged them, even elevated them to part of civic life. The toilet wasn't a place you went to escape. It was where you connected. Imagine that. You, sweaty and confused, locking eyes with a senator while discussing public infrastructure reforms. Both of you seated on cold marble, surrounded by the gentle splash of flowing sewage. There are reports from Roman historians about public debates starting in latrines. Poets workshopping verses. Friends meeting up to catch up on gossip. Even business transactions, not even kidding, have been said to occur over a good, long sit. One scholar described Roman latrines as forums with flush, places where the common man could literally rub thighs with the elite. Class boundaries blurred when everyone was stuck on the same bench, waiting for the same sponge. And while we're here, let's talk about Roman small talk. You're likely to hear complaints about taxes, still relatable, updates on who cheated whom at dice, rants about the weather, which somehow, even 2,000 years ago, was still being blamed on politicians. And always, gossip, juicy, often made up, deliciously dramatic bathroom gossip. You hear a story now, something about a merchant caught watering down his wine with sewer runoff. Everyone groans. Someone swears vengeance. The sponge swishes. The circle of trust is strong in this room. There's a kind of rhythm to it all. Not just the sound of water, but the flow of words, the ease with which everyone slips into conversation. You forget, briefly, that you're in a bathroom. You forget that these people are strangers. You forget that this is ancient history. Because in this moment, it's just you and a group of humans, tired, unwashed, deeply opinionated, sitting down together to take care of things. There's something kind of beautiful about that. Well, beautiful adjacent. One of the older men next to you tells a joke. It's vulgar. It's wildly inappropriate. And it's absolutely hilarious. You snort. The bench shakes slightly as laughter ripples through the line. There's camaraderie here, born not from status or wealth, but from shared vulnerability. You've seen it in modern life too, the way people bond in locker rooms, dorms, military barracks. Strip away privacy, and suddenly everyone's a little more human. Scholars still argue whether this communal atmosphere helped build trust in Roman society. Was it intentional, just cultural, or simply a side effect of limited plumbing technology? No one really knows. But clearly, it worked. For centuries. You're now mid-conversation about chariot racing odds when someone mentions that the emperor once used this very latrine. Probably not true, but also, possibly true, because public latrines were truly public. No VIP stalls. No private lounges. Just stone benches and shared silence. Or shared noise, depending on the group. And it wasn't just men, either, though we'll get into the gender politics later. For now, let's just appreciate this brief, bizarre moment in time where the Roman toilet was the original coffee shop. No caffeine, no frappuccino, but plenty of movement. You stand up, wiping your hands on your tunic instinctively, though why, you're not sure. The man next to you nods, says something about the upcoming gladiator games, and gives you a look that somehow says both, "See you later," and, "I wish you well in your digestion." You nod back. The sponge gurgles somewhere behind you. And as you step away from the bench, you can't help but feel it, some strange warmth in your gut. Maybe from the food you regret eating earlier. But more likely, from the weird, deeply human experience of sharing a bathroom chat with someone who definitely made eye contact for too long. You survived the Roman public toilet. Now you're surviving the Roman public toilet conversation. And honestly, you're doing great. You've done the public thing now. You've nodded at strangers mid-wipe, you've laughed at questionable jokes on a cold stone bench, and you've successfully avoided making contact with a communal sponge. You're basically a veteran. But now, you're curious. If this is how the average Roman lived, what about the rich folks? The senators, the generals, the marble-clad gods of Roman society, surely they didn't have to queue up for a slot on the public bench like the rest of the empire's backside. So you head toward the Domus, a Roman private home. And not just any home. This one belongs to a family of status. You know that because the atrium alone could fit a small parade. The floor is mosaic, the walls are painted with scenes of nymphs and battles, and there's a faint smell of incense in the air, which is suspiciously lacking in any poop-related undertones. A miracle, really. You're led through hallways, past courtyards and fountains, until finally, tucked discreetly near the back of the house, you find it. The private latrina. It's small, one seat, quiet, cozy, in a way. And weirdly, luxurious. There's a low marble bench with a single oval opening, polished, smooth, well used. But not in a horrifying way. It's clean. There's no crowd, no eye contact, no one talking about grain tariffs while unbuttoning their tunic. Just a peaceful little room. With a hole in the floor. And it smells fine. Like maybe someone sprinkled rose water in here. Because they probably did. You sit alone. For the first time since you arrived in this ancient city, you don't feel like you're part of a live studio audience. It's eerily quiet. You almost miss the chaos of the public latrine. Almost. The setup is similar. Stone bench, waste channel beneath, water gently flowing. But here, the outflow is disguised, covered with a decorative grate. And the water trough in front for cleaning. It's not just a trench, it's an actual basin, carved with delicate patterns, filled with water that smells faintly of herbs. Lavender. Maybe mint. The sponge on a stick is here too. Of course. But it looks newer. Less traumatic. It even has its own stand. Like it was proudly displayed, or at least respected. You don't touch it. You just nod at it. Respectfully. Because this is a rich person's poop room. There's even a little shelf beside you. Probably for storing extra sponges. Or scrolls. Or snacks. Who knows? Romans loved multitasking. Some archaeological finds suggest that people may have actually kept reading material nearby. Wax tablets, short verses, jokes, curses. Entertainment, because nature doesn't rush. And in elite homes, the toilet might even be attached to the kitchen. Yes, really. Disgusting. Maybe. But efficient. The latrine often shared drainage with the kitchen sink or food prep area. Same plumbing, different pipes. You try not to think about that too hard. You glance around. The walls are painted with faded frescoes, not just decorative, but potentially symbolic. Some show gods. Others have fish or dolphins, associated with water and purity. Maybe it's just design. Maybe it's subtle divine protection for a very mortal activity. Some scholars still argue whether the elite had a completely separate sewer system, or if their waste just flowed into the same channels as everyone else's, democratized drainage, if you will. What's clear is this: they had comfort. Not just physical, but psychological. Because in this room, you don't feel like a cog in the Roman sanitation machine. You feel like a person. A person with bathroom dignity. Even the sponge seems less judgmental here. There's evidence some elite Romans used cloths or soft moss instead of the public sponge, something more personal, more hygienic. Possibly perfumed, possibly disposable, all very tasteful, very upscale. You think about that as you sit quietly, staring at the tiny fresco of Neptune above your head. He's holding a trident, smiling, almost like he approves. And honestly, he should. Because this, right here, might be the first moment of peace you've had since arriving in ancient Rome. No one is talking to you. No one is sharing their political opinions mid-defecation. No one is reaching for a sponge with questionable history. It's just you, the marble, the whisper of flowing water, and Neptune's approving smirk. Still, even in private, there's a kind of ritual to it. Romans took this stuff seriously, not just because of cleanliness, but because of symbolism. Using the bathroom was a release, physically and spiritually. Letting go of waste, clearing the body, maintaining order in the home. Some Romans even performed small cleansing rituals after using the toilet. A splash of scented water. A brief prayer, maybe even an offering, a coin dropped near the drain as a token to the underworld gods. Because when your waste flows into the earth, you're not just disposing of it, you're sending it into another realm. A sacred, stinky realm. More on that later. You rise, feeling slightly cleaner than usual, and not just because the marble was surprisingly warm. You turn to leave the latrina, glancing one last time at the sponge, which somehow, in this room, feels less like a torture device and more like a misunderstood tool. Wealth really does change how things feel. You walk back through the villa, past fountains and slaves and soft torchlight. You feel spoiled now, softened, maybe even a little smug. You've seen the best of Roman toilet life. You've lived the spa version. And as you step back into the chaos of the street, the public latrines and their chaos now feel like a bad dream. You'll be thinking about this marble seat for days. Maybe forever. Blank, blank. As you step back out into the streets, the contrast hits you like a gust of chilly air. Outside, Rome hums, the market vendors shouting, the clatter of carts on cobblestones, the distant calls of children playing near the fountain. But right beneath all this lively noise, you know the city's sewage flows relentlessly, unseen but essential. You pause to consider the complexity of it all. A city of over 1 million people, living cheek to cheek, disposing of waste in a way that's, frankly, pretty impressive for the time. It's a delicate balance, managing human needs without modern plumbing, without chemicals, without pumps. Just stone, gravity, and water from faraway mountains. Your curiosity pulls you toward the Cloaca Maxima again, that ancient, enormous sewer swallowing the city's dirty secrets. You stand at a bridge over the Tiber River and peer down, imagining the murky water flowing beneath you. It's dark, murky, and definitely not something you want to touch. Yet, it's the lifeline of the city's sanitation. Romans didn't just toss waste anywhere, they engineered solutions, even if imperfect ones. The Cloaca Maxima was originally built to drain marshes and protect the city from flooding, but eventually became the central channel for sewage. Imagine waste from public latrines, private homes, baths, and street runoff all funneled into one massive sewer, heading straight for the river. There's a strange irony here. The same river that quenched the thirst of Rome's citizens was also the city's dumping ground. Scholars still argue whether this polluted water contributed to the spread of diseases or if Rome's impressive water management kept illness at bay. The truth is probably somewhere in between. You watch a few waterfowl bobbing on the river's surface, oblivious to the city's secret flow beneath. The Tiber is a living artery, carrying both life and waste. And the Romans, they lived with it, adapted to it, and even celebrated it in their own way. You recall stories of Romans holding feasts and celebrations near the riverbanks, not just for the view but because the water was a symbol of both cleansing and renewal. Baths and latrines weren't just functional, they had a cultural and even spiritual significance. Water was life, and death, flowing side by side. As the sun begins to set, casting a warm orange glow over the city, you feel a mix of awe and relief. Awe at the engineering feats, the societal acceptance of shared human realities, and relief that you're not currently sitting on a cold marble bench with a suspicious sponge. Rome was messy, it was complicated, and its bathroom habits reflect exactly that. You shake your head with a wry smile. The next time you complain about modern plumbing, remember this: Romans built a functioning sanitation system without pumps, plastics, or even soap as we know it. And you probably won't survive a day in their public latrines. You tuck that thought away as you wander off into the bustling evening, the sounds of Rome's streets mixing with the faint, ever-present whisper of flowing water, the city's secret song. The city's evening air is thick with scents, roasting meats, fresh bread, and the unmistakable tang of, well, less pleasant aromas from the nearby latrines. But you're no longer fazed by that. You've earned your stripes as a Roman sanitation survivor. Curiosity nudges you toward another curious aspect: the relationship Romans had with personal hygiene beyond the toilet. After all, how did they keep themselves clean in a world without showers or soap bars like we know today? You wander toward the nearby public baths, grand social hubs where cleanliness and leisure mingled. These were places where Romans bathed not just to wash away dirt, but to socialize, relax, and sometimes to conduct business. The baths were a city's pride, a place where water was abundant and flowing, much like in their latrines. Inside, you feel the heat from the caldarium, the warm steam enveloping you like a heavy blanket. People splash in the pools, rub themselves down with oils, and scrape skin with a curved metal tool called a strigil. No soap here, just oil and scraping, a practice foreign to you but highly effective for removing grime. Romans valued this ritual. Cleanliness wasn't vanity, it was a sign of civilization. There was a sharp cultural divide. Uncleanliness was associated with the barbarians and the uncultured. But back to the sponge, the infamous tersorium. It wasn't just a toilet tool, it was part of their hygiene routine. After using it, Romans would rinse the sponge in a bucket of water mixed with vinegar or salt, believing this prevented disease. Whether that actually worked, scholars still debate. What's clear is that hygiene was a constant concern, even if their methods seem odd now. The baths, the latrines, the flowing water everywhere, it all connects in a vast system centered on water as life and purification. And yet, you can't help but notice the contrast. The public latrines were communal, crude, noisy places, while the baths were opulent, designed for leisure and relaxation.